All right, good afternoon. It is December 21st, Monday of Christmas week. You can see we got a Christmas tree in view even, so we're feeling really festive. And I am sitting here in my office in Oskaloosa, Iowa. I am Eric Sytsma, the Southern Iowa Regional Representative for Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever. And with me this afternoon are Jim Inglis in Ohio, the Director of our Governmental Affairs Program, and Bethany Erb, our Governmental Affairs Representative. And are you in Montana right now?
I'm currently in Montana, yes.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, welcome. This is our second installment of the Governmental Affairs Update. So once again, it is Christmas week. Thank you so much for making time for me and for all of the volunteers that are going to be watching this and catching us up. We have a stacked agenda. We got way too many things to cover. So I'm going to jump right in rather than kill any more time here. Jim, let's talk about the big program. CRP's been in the news. What's the word?
Sure. So we wanted to be sure we gave a quick update on CRP and a little bit of background on where we're at. So right now, just in the last couple of weeks, the USDA did announce a sign up that will begin on January 4th and run through February 12th. So as we talked about back in October, recall that our last update was kind of that first week in October. We weren't sure how that was going to line out or where we were going to be acres wise. So there's really no way to sugarcoat it, but the current enrollment on CRP is not looking too good. Just a little bit of history, though, to go back to 2007, where we peaked in the CRP enrollment about 36.7 million acres. And if you happen to be pheasant hunting and upland hunting during that time, there's some pretty good years there. Actually, if you look at that period from about that 10 to 20 year period, we had fairly stable pheasant numbers into 2010. Unfortunately, the report that was released last week from USDA, we're down to 20.7 million acres. So that's a difference of 16 million. So not as good. We kind of anticipated that enrollment. And as we mentioned back in the October update, then we did have acres come in with the general sign up from the sign up last year, and then the ongoing continuous sign up as well as grasslands. I think the positive side of this is that we do have the ability to enroll about 7 million acres or re-enroll 7 million acres here during 2021. And how we kind of come up with that figure is we're about 4 million acres underneath the congressionally authorized cap right now. And then there's about 3 million acres that are going to be expiring here in October this year. So that gives us that 7 million acre window. You're going to see more coming out from us, like in the Pheasants Forever, Quail Forever magazine. Bethany and I are working on some blogs and some other things, so we'll keep you updated on that as much as possible. What I do want to emphasize, though, is that we believe that the language was right in the 2018 Farm Bill. It was a USDA administrative tweaks to the program that have caused us the biggest issues. Really, if we expect farmers, ranchers, and landowners to enroll in these conservation programs, whether it's CRP or the other suite of conservation programs we have in the Farm Bill, they've got to be. We've got to compensate those landowners fairly. Give them the cost share that they need to implement them. Give them the cost share to manage those practices. And so we're hoping to see that. We'll see here in early 2021 on how that kicks off. But we really encourage that. If you do have a contract that's expiring now or you're interested in new, get in there early next year. There's going to be a ton of opportunities. So we'll be looking forward to that. The other thing that I wanted to cover on CRP that you may have seen is that back in early December, then Colin Peterson, chairman of House Ag Committee, still the chairman of the committee, his career is coming to an end in Congress. And he had a press conference where he said that we needed 50 million acres of CRP, and he thinks that that's what the number should be. It was a really interesting news conference, and Howard Vincent, our president and CEO, did join him and thanked him for his time and being a champion of the program. But really what Chairman Peterson said, the point of introducing that bill was to make a point. Even though it's not going to go anywhere this Congress, maybe somebody will pick it up. But and we're going to talk a little bit here about the ability for CRP and other private lands conservation programs and its ability to capture carbon. And that's becoming, there's a lot more talk around that in Washington and across the country, in the public and private sector. So, we'll be talking about that here in a little bit. And Chairman Peterson basically made the point that he thought that CRP was one of the best, if not the best program out there. And if you think of what CRP can do, it can do prairie grass, it can do grasslands, both native and restorations. It can plant longleaf pine in the southeast for quail. It can restore wetlands. All of those things that it could do, as well as the other suite of programs in the Farm Bill, can be part of that discussion. So with that, I guess, Bethany, I'll hand it over to you to talk a little bit about grasslands.
Hey everyone, Bethany Erb here. Glad to be back on video conference with everyone as a end of the year closes out and the lame duck session concludes. It has been a busy few weeks. As Jim mentioned, we've seen some rapid movement with CRP. You might have seen that we had an op-ed published about the merit of grasslands, and it was an op-ed signed on by 5 CEOs. Our CEO, Howard Vincent, Whit Fosberg of Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership, Jeff Crane, Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation, Colin O'Mara, National Wildlife Federation, and Rebecca Humphreys with the National Wild Turkey Federation. And this piece ran in a publication called The Hill, so that it was right squarely in front of Congress's eyes, that talked about how important grasslands were for a variety of reasons. The economic benefits, the habitat benefits, and then the carbon capture benefits. And so what we're seeing, and within that op-ed, we call for a new grasslands program, a grasslands act. We're working with our partners in Washington right now to shape up some legislation. It's pretty exciting stuff, and you'll be seeing a lot more about that from us. The op-ed's going to run in our next magazine, and if you want to see it, it's linked on our website. But what we're noticing in Washington as Capitol Hill changes and the new administration comes in, that there's just a lot of discussion about how policy, natural resource and agriculture policy should complement carbon capture and climate change. And our position has been and will continue to be that we bring tools to the table, that what we do for grasslands enhancement and protection is an important part of the climate resiliency discussion. And we all have the same end goal. And so, we're really being very careful that we're not, getting into heated debates about right or wrong or to what extent, and that we're really we have something to offer and we want to be a part of the solution. And that's, on Chairman Peterson's 50 million acre bill, as Jim said, the point is to make a point. And what he said is, what he sees coming, what he forecasts in the new administration, new Congress, is that there will be climate policy, and he doesn't think we should reinvent the wheel, that we have this tremendous program known as the Conservation Reserve Program, and let's make more of it, and let's make it better, because it works, it's worked for a long time, and let's continue to promote it. So that was, we really are thankful that he did that. And then as we, look at additional Farm Bill policy and hopefully some new policy, we're calling it the Grasslands Act, but that name could change. We have a ton of opportunity, and we want to just reassure our members, our partners, our landowners that any policy ever, but as it relates specifically to climate policy, we will not engage, support anything that has to do with a regulatory burdensome approach. Anything that we will do will be incentive-based and complementary to rural communities and the agriculture community. So just wanted to put that out there. The next thing that we're kind of continuing to work on, as we've shared with our, with our members, the Great American Outdoors Act passed in June, and it took an old program known as the Land and Water Conservation Fund and combined it with a new program, Restore Our Public, ROPA, sorry. I had a hard time with the acronyms on the last video. But what ROPA does is it pays for backlog maintenance, and it's only a 5-year program. So you've got an old program, LWCF, a new program, combine them, give them a new name, and give them a lot more money. So LWCF will be permanently funded forever at $900 million. Wow. And that's a big deal because it creates new stateside opportunity for us. There's a stateside component of LWCF. It pays for things that increase public access by fee acquisition, easements, but it also does things for local communities like swimming pools, fishing access sites. It has a diverse use for recreational purposes, including but not limited to hunting access. So when this new money comes in for stateside, there's going to be an opportunity for our members, our volunteers, to have some input on the process and say, you know what, I really think this project would be a good one that would be beneficial for our community. So we are focused on, what that new LWCF stateside money will look like and how we can be a part of influencing the process of how those projects are selected.
Absolutely. And that does make a big difference. I mean, I'll vouch for it. If you haven't taken the opportunity, hop on Google and look up LWCF's impacts in your state. At least Iowa's got a great database with a map, and you can look and see what it's done. And it's done a lot within 20 miles of my house here. So I'm very appreciative of any more money we can get into that program.
It's rather complicated because LWCF funds 7 programs spread across 2 different agencies, both Department of Agriculture and Department of Interior. So sometimes folks just don't know where the money's coming from for a federally funded project in their state. And so we're trying to bring more awareness to how some of these federally acquired projects are happening. But you're right, there's been a lot of stuff created over its lifetime that folks aren't even really aware of that was LWCF funded. So
yep.
Look for more news from us on that.
Perfect.
Finally, on my end here, we Recovering America's Wildlife Act. You guys have heard from us for several years now. Would be a new program, $1.4 billion per year to pay to state agencies dedicated to curtailing endangered species listings or keeping them off the list. So preventative work so they don't go on the list. But there's a broad range of benefits for all habitat, but pheasants and quail and pollinators. We were working this bill for 4 years. We're able to do kind of a tricky little policy thing kind of at the end and have a 5-year authorization included in the House Transportation Bill. So not exactly what we wanted. We want permanent full funding, but as we move into the new Congress, there will be another infrastructure bill. Might be an opportunity to get something done there, and we'll continue to promote independent legislation that would fully permanently fund at $1.4 billion per year. So we've got a lot going on in the new Congress, and I think the other thing to kind of share with our members is that Jim and I and our team have been involved with what's called the transition team. When an administration transitions to a new administration, there's a temporary team put in place, and they collect recommendations. And so we've provided both agriculture and interior independently and with partners kind of the suggestions that we would see would make for better conservation outcomes. And we're excited at this point to see the people that are being mentioned or appointed. For example, at USDA, Secretary Vilsack will be returning. Brings a lot of accomplishment and depth and breadth of understanding of our program. So, we're excited for the new transition and the opportunity to get our priorities right out there in front of the new policy decision makers.
Absolutely. And I'll say, as an Iowan, it is good to see Mr. Vilsack headed back to that office. It's a good person to see. It's nice to have a familiar face up there.
Yeah.
So just to hit on one thing on the House Ag Committee, and there was a growing Climate Solutions Act that started out in the Senate, and that was sponsored by, at that time, ranking member Debbie Stabenow from Michigan, Democrat, and Senator Mike Braun from Indiana. So again, bipartisan on that side. There was also a House companion bill that was sponsored by Don Bacon, Representative Don Bacon from Nebraska, and then as well as some of his other colleagues there on the House side. That legislation itself was supported by over 50 ag and conservation and environmental groups. So even ahead of this, going back last year, this carbon sequestration, how it was going to work in the markets was starting. So we'd expect to see that same thing happen in like the House and Senate Ag committees, as well as their natural resources and environment committees there. So it's something that we're prepared for. One of the other things I wanted to hit on here is that we had the Pittman-Robertson funding. As you all know, that's the federal excise tax that shows up on hunting, and then the Dingell-Johnson on fishing equipment, but hunting and archery equipment. And we just got the numbers in here in the last week on what that looks like for last year. And probably not surprise to anybody, we had increases on both sides, both hunting and angling. And, I think we can attribute that to the pandemic, where there was an increase in sales. There was over a 15% increase. Now, when you calculate this all out between hunting, fishing, equipment, we're probably looking somewhere in the neighborhood of $15 billion spent that we all spent. I know I bought maybe some new fishing stuff, and I know Eric, I know you probably bought some stuff. You're a pretty serious angler.
A lot of
doing some
Yep.
cool yeah. And then, but the other thing that was interesting is that there's also and as you know too, the ammo sales. So ammo sales themselves over that last year was upwards of 22% increase in ammo. So overall, 15% increase over FY19. What that means to us is over $700 million that's going to be distributed back out to the states to do projects. And, and a lot of times we're partnering with our state fish and wildlife agencies to help spend that money to do habitat work. It also shows up for some of our R3 efforts for trying to, whether it's a hunter education class or getting new hunters out there and engaged on that. So, and on the fishing side, it was very similar to 13% overall increase. So again, it's just something to watch. Recall that we have mentioned that with the changes with PR Modernization Act that we supported and passed last year. And worked on. So again, another great tool out there. We'll have than last year to spend here in FY21.
Good. You paused there just for a sec. I was worried your internet was going down, but we got your back. So I think we got everything. So
all right.
It's exciting looking at those numbers. The combination. It looks like the difference between fiscal year 19 and 20 combined for Pittman Robertson and Dingle Johnson is like $180 million of money going back to projects. That's just exciting. It's great to see, and honestly, it's exciting to see more people getting out in the field and hunting and fishing. It's a great thing to see. All right, let's see here. So I also had made a note that you wanted to touch on the policy landing page.
Okay. Yeah, so we did work on a new page. It's up and going now. If you look at your latest issue of Quail Forever or Pheasants Forever magazine, and you look at the Capital Insider, it's in there. But if you go on the main page, you can go over and look at the policy section. You can kind of go through and you'll see this video posted there as well as our previous ones, and then any updates there. So what we're trying to do and what Bethany and I are working on content is doing these videos like we're doing here today, as well as the Capital Insider that we've done right along. And then usually if something breaks, it's going to show up on our social media pages, Pheasants Forever, Quail Forever on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. And then if it's something really serious, then we will send an email out to the regional reps across the country and then distribute it out to the chapter leaders. But that's how we're trying to keep as engaged as possible and as quickly and timely as possible when things come up. So be looking for that here and into next year.
Wonderful. And I believe Bethany mentioned this, but the op-ed from The Hill, America's Dwindling Grasslands Require Action, is going to be linked on that policy page as well, correct? Might be there already. I haven't checked.
It's there, and it will be in the magazine in the spring too.
Awesome. All right, so we got through our official agenda. I've got questions now. Do you have a few minutes to answer a couple questions on some stuff we touched on last time?
Sure.
Awesome. All right, so Jim, last time we talked, you were getting ready to dive into your first season as an archery deer hunter.
Yes, that's right. So I think when we talked in October, I'd been in the stand maybe twice. I spent 15 times in the stand, usually between 2 and 4 hours at a time, which was incredible. It was great to see everything. And like I mentioned there in October, I was hunting over a CRP practice and the food plots and seeing everything. So it was pretty neat. So my first archery deer ever happened Thanksgiving morning. So I was very thankful to have that harvest there. And it was incredible then. And then our gun season ended last week, or we have a split gun season, and I was able to get another doe, both does. So didn't have the big guys show up. But it was also a rather interesting season because the day after I got that one during gun season, we now have our first ever case of wild CWD in a deer. And it just happened that buck was within a couple miles of where I hunt. So crazy to have it show up where it did. Of course, the DNR is looking into that. We've got all those restrictions that have come in. But, it really hit home for me being that close. But we also talked about that in the ACE Act the last time we talked in October. And part of that was to have some CWD funding in there to help out state agencies and federal agencies, but also to create a task force. And I think that it's important, just as we look at this overall model of the North American model of conservation, is that if we don't have extra funding for these types of things, then it takes away from our ability and the agency's ability to do habitat work. So again, we're doing everything we can. We're partnering with the DNR. It's just going to be a tremendous amount of testing and figure out what's happening. But I know many other states have dealt with it, and now Ohio's on the list. So
it is a pretty big resource drain. I got friends that work for the DNR, and there are years when they're spending a vast majority of their time just collecting samples and trying to get those to the labs. It's a huge drain on resource. I'm sorry to hear it's so close to you all of a sudden. I've got it a couple counties away, certainly not within 2 miles. It's nerve-wracking. I'm not looking forward to that day.
Yeah.
But while we're on the subject of Mr. Jim Inglis, I did get my magazine, and I pulled it out, and in the middle of it, I see this, some cool shotguns, and it says illustrations by Dan Burr and story by none other than you.
Yes, that was a couple of years in the making, and I'm so excited to see that. So you asked me about those old shotguns back in October. And those are my grandfather's and great-grandfather's guns. You'll have to read the story. There's a lot of other little spins to it. It took me a couple of years to write it, but just so thankful to work with the team. But yeah, the editors and the magazine developers didn't let me see that until I saw it in the magazine. Got it. So they made me wait to see the final product. But yeah, just really thankful to have that in there.
Good. Well, yeah, it's exciting. I haven't read all of it. I've read part of it, so I still have to finish it. But it just showed up here yesterday, so still working on it. But glad to see that, and I'll encourage everybody to sit down and read it. It's always good. And I'm a sucker for old guns, so that got my attention right off the bat. Let's see here. All right, so let's see here. We covered a little bit of the transition, Bethany. You knocked that out. I was going to ask you that. You beat me to it. So
sorry.
Points for you. No, that's great. It's everybody in this country knows that we've got a big change coming, and we're all trying to figure out how we can be as proactive as we can and make sure that change makes more birds, makes our water quality better, saves more carbon. So it's good to know that we got people like you two working with those teams and trying to make it as good as possible. So, all right, I am going to ask you one more question. I didn't know if I'd have time for it, but I'm going to say that we've got time for it. You mentioned TRCP and some other groups that are pretty involved in some of the legislative stuff. I did see a note about the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation, and it looks like our CEO, Howard Vincent's going to be a little more involved in that. Any information on that at all that you'd like to share with everybody?
Sure. Well, I can add to that too. It looks like we might have lost Bethany here for a minute, but no, I can jump in on that. So for 5 years ago, we had an MOU for the first time with the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation. And again, you'll see some of this in the magazine and in our our blogs and social media as well. But basically, what we do is we partner with CSF, Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation, to do work at the national level, at the congressional level, and at the state and governor level. So they have what they call the Sportsmen's Caucus, and those members join the caucus, and then they get briefings and portfolios on what our priorities are. And they're across the board. So we renewed that, and we were able to host that virtually. And Howard and then Jeff Crane, the president of CSF, signed that, and we're ready to go for another 5 years. So I know some of you may have participated at your state levels with a CSF, or usually it's it's a bunch of groups that get together on that. And but we really depend on having that intel and that information from the congressional offices that are our caucus members, as well as their staffers, that know that these issues and conservation and hunting and angling are important to us. So
you bet. That makes a big difference. It's good to see us, staying involved and getting involved in that. I have been lucky enough to attend a few of the Sportsmen's Foundation events in Des Moines. meet with some important people and, share our conservation message. And I even got a free hat out of the deal, and my kid stole it. And I'm pretty sure I had the only fourth grader in the country who was rocking a Sportsman's Caucus hat for about 3 minutes. But you know what? That's it. He liked it. I liked it. It's a good thing to do. So always fun to get involved in those.
Am I back on, or did I cut out?
Oh, you're on.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I just wanted to add a little something too.
Yeah, you're back.
A little more definition about what the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation does and their function. As Jim said, they manage the congressional caucuses. Well, what are caucuses? They're legislative bodies that vote together. So it's sort of like a legislative union, for lack of a different word. And so they manage the one in Washington, D.C., the Congressional Sportsmen's Caucus, and then they have expanded the program at the state level. And so it's a really awesome opportunity for us at the state level, and our new MOU is going to expand that opportunity so that we have more direct contact and access with the state legislatures and can keep better track of policy as it comes up, but have input as it moves forward.
That's great. So when they talk about getting the caucus together and making sure they're all on board, this is one of them, and they can work as a team.
Correct. Yep.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
That's good. Well, that was the last question that I had for you. I appreciate, probably went over time again. You can blame me for that. I just got too many questions. But, once again, as somebody over here in Iowa, we got stuff that comes up. I get volunteers ask me all the time what's coming up the next legislative session. We all very much appreciate you two doing what you do and making yourselves available and representing us both at the state and the nationwide level. It's really just, it makes everybody feel really lucky that we have great people representing us and making our voices heard and trying to be team players and get conservation on the ground. That's
a great way to sum it up. And Eric, just one more point on that, but a bow on it, we'll say, is we can't do it without that grassroots effort at the local and the state and the local and the county level. It's so important. So, you're going to see call to actions from us here in 2021. I guarantee it. And when you see those, then please, act on those. So thank you.
You bet. Well, when we get when the rep team gets the emails and the phone calls, we'll be sure to send them out to all of our chapter leaders and membership as much as we can. So they tend to get riled up and get on the phone and shoot the emails out, and I hear that makes a difference. So we'll keep trying to push that and do as much as we can.
Sure does.
All right.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for your time. I hope you have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And I'm sure we'll be hearing from you again come January and February with everything that's changing and coming up and all the good stuff that's going to be part of 2021. It's got to be better than 2020, right?
Sure. All right. Thanks, Eric.
Thank you.